Hi, I'm Kenzie Leonard from the International Dyslexia Association of Georgia's Teen Board. Welcome back to the IDA College Q&A series where we explore tools to help navigate the transition from high school to college for students with dyslexia. I want to thank Robyn Painter, an attorney with over 20 years of experience in education law, among other legal areas, for speaking with me today. And Ms. Painter, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit and say some more about the work that you do?
Sure thing. I am Robyn Painter, so thank you so much, Kenzie, for having me here today. I am the owner and principal at Painter Legal LLC, which is a law firm focused on education law, everything from Section 504 to IEPs, to disciplinary cases, all the way up through, kindergarten to the college level. Um, I love supporting students and parents, and I'm just very excited to be here with you today.
Okay, great. Well, so I was thinking we could start off by talking a little bit more about the application process. So, one question I had for you is, do high school students need to inform a post-secondary institution that they have a learning disability either during the application process or after acceptance?
Students with a disability absolutely do not have to inform a school at any time of their disability. Um, at no point are they required to do so. However, if they do want accommodations after acceptance, they must disclose the disability as long with any relevant documentation of the disability and engage what's called the interactive process with the school in order to get accommodations to help them in their schooling.
That makes sense. And can a college take into account a student's disclosure of a disability when reviewing their admissions application?
They're not allowed to discriminate against someone because of their disability, but some students do want to write about their disability and the experiences they've had that have maybe made them stronger or more resilient, or have demonstrated that, they are an extremely hard worker. And students can do that in their entrance essays. Whether or not they want to do that is a decision for the student. And I would just tell any student to talk with your parent about it and decide if that's something you feel comfortable with or not.
Okay, so it sounds like that's really kind of a personal choice, and maybe it works like a little bit of an essay about yourself, kind of a thing.
Yeah, like a personal statement, I think.
Yeah.
And certainly, I see my clients who have disabilities bring so much value and resilience and determination that I think those are skills and traits that any college would welcome. And again, even if you do disclose that in your essay, the school is not allowed to discriminate against you because of whatever you would disclose.
Right, that's good to keep in mind. So, talking a little bit more about understanding your rights under different special education laws, can you explain to me the key differences in the legislation that governs accommodations in high school versus college?
Yes, absolutely. So when you're in kindergarten through 12th grade, special education is mostly governed under what's called the IDEA statute. And this is what is in place for students who get IEPs, which result in special pull-out services or maybe paraprofessional support or OT support, speech language support, anything where they are getting a service from someone at the school is usually governed by IDEA. Um, Also, in the K through 12 setting, it's important to take into account Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, unlike IDEA, which is a services statute, Section 504 and the ADA are civil rights statutes which provide equal access to schools for students with disabilities. So, those statutes are responsible for making sure that students have everything from wheelchair ramps and elevator access to braille services if they are sight impaired, to preferential seating and extended time on tests if they are someone who maybe processes things a little more slowly or has attention issues. So really, those are these things that can happen to provide greater access to school and to the learning environment for people with disabilities, but that don't necessarily cost the school any money. They're adjustments that the school can make and are called accommodations. And so when you go to college, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the ADA follow you. and are still in play for you, but the IDEA is really only available when you're in the K through 12 section.
Okay, that makes sense. I think it's important to note that difference, definitely. And do public and private colleges have to follow different sorts of guidelines, or are they all compliant to the same laws that you mentioned?
They are all compliant. So this is another area where we have a difference between the public and private, or the K through 12 and the higher education realm. In the K through 12 realm, really all of the statutes I just discussed are only protective of students in public school settings. Once you're in a private school setting, if you're in, elementary school, middle school, or high school, those schools do not have to abide by the ADA 504 or IDEA. There are specialized schools that cater to students with disabilities where you might get great services, but private schools can pick and choose who they serve and what they do and what their curricula are. However, in the post-secondary realm, which is colleges, technical colleges, vocational situations, um, community colleges, things of that nature, almost every college in that sphere is going to accept federal financial aid dollars because they all give student loans to their students. There are a few exceptions, though they are not many. So the great majority, if your school gives federal financial aid, they are on the hook to comply with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the ADA. And so you would have access to accommodations in those settings.
And if a student wants to go through the process to try and take advantage of those accommodations, what would you recommend would be, the first steps that they take once they go to their school to make those requests?
Sure. So you're going to want to contact your Office of Student Services and ask them. The offices under Student Services sometimes have different names. Sometimes it's, the Disability Services Office. Sometimes it's the Student Inclusion Office. Sometimes it's called the Student Access Office or the Student Experience Office. Well, however your school names it, you're going to call the Office of Student Services and explain what you need. They'll direct you to the right place. And then most likely you're going to have an intake appointment with a counselor who's going to talk to you about the nature of your disability and the accommodations and services that you received in high school, what worked for you, what didn't work for you. They're also going to want documentation. They're going to want to see if you did have an IEP in high school or a Section 504 plan. They're going to want to see those plans. And then they are going to also probably want a psychoeducational report or other relevant medical documentation that is less than 2 years old. So if you are someone who this can frequently come up, especially with students who are served in a specialized private school for high school and middle school and elementary school. Say you went to a special school starting in third grade, and your parents at that time got you a psychoeducational evaluation to determine that you had dyslexia and ADHD. Um, you probably didn't get a psychoeducational report after that. And so that's a very stale report. Your school would still be able to give the college a report of the accommodations you received while you were at the school, but you would want to get that psychoeducational report before you went off to college, ideally after the age of 16, so that it's nice and fresh. And the school can say, okay, we see what accommodations you need. We see that these are still valid diagnoses for you, and this is what we can offer.
Yeah, definitely important to keep your documentation updated. And
Yes.
can you request an independent evaluation if you disagree with, a college's assessment, if you were to get an assessment there to ask if you could have accommodations?
Yeah, sometimes students who don't have the ability to pay for an evaluation with a psychologist on their own can either be referred to their schools, depending on the school. If the school has a medical school attached, sometimes they will have services through that or through the student health center that can help the student. And sometimes they can apply. I know in Georgia, you can apply through the Georgia Board of Regents to have an independent evaluation um, to help defray the costs there. But those sometimes do take longer. And so you might find yourself waiting for services or accommodations while that's taking place. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that that makes sense. And what happens if you go through the process and then the request is denied? Are there any other options that you have?
Sure, you can usually take your well, so let's describe the process first. It's what's called an interactive process. And so you would meet with the counselor, you'd give them your documentation, they'd look at it, they'd recommend most likely a set of accommodations for you and produce what's called an accommodations letter that you would take around to your professors to let the professors know on the first day of class what accommodations you need, and you would have a conversation with your professors at that point. The reason they provide that letter to you and put the responsibility on you to speak with your professors is that by the time people reach college age, sometimes they may say, in my math class, I'm fine. I don't need accommodations, but it's really in my English class that I'm going to need more time on test. And so they may have 6 letters, but they may only give out 2 or 3 of them to those classes where they really need and want to use accommodations. So they will give that to you. Most of the time, if you come in as someone who's had accommodations before and you have a diagnosis um, that would support accommodations, they will give you some sort of accommodations. You have the right to accept those accommodations or to ask them at that office to reconsider, and you can provide them with further documentation to help them make that reconsideration. If at some point they come back with something or they just refuse to put in place whatever extra accommodations you may want, um, you would have the right to appeal that up through your schools. We'll usually have some sort of like interschool administrative system. So you might have to appeal to the dean of the Office of Student Services and have them take a look at your record. If that doesn't go anywhere, you can always file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights and have them take a look at your case as well. I will say that accommodations that I see given in a college setting with appropriate documentation typically are preferential seating, extended time on assignments, extended time for testing, a private, distraction-free testing location, as well as note taker services. Um, if those are the kind of things you're looking for, I would not anticipate any sort of problem obtaining those services. If you need something a little more specialized, as long as you have documentation to support it, you should be in good shape.
Well, that's good to know it doesn't usually come to those sort of situations.
It doesn't. For the most part, colleges want their students to succeed, and we are sort of past the time when professors really balked at the idea of people having extra time. I think it's become a much more common thing, and people are much more willing to ask for accommodations. And so it's become a little more, um, I won't say it's always it's not stress-free, but it is definitely not as stressful or difficult as it once was for students.
And can a college ever charge you for providing any sort of academic adjustment?
No, they should not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so once the school has received the necessary documentation, I know you were walking us through the process. How long should that typically take? And at what point should the student speak up if they feel that that time frame is becoming unreasonable?
I would say it should probably take a few weeks. So it is not the kind of thing you want to rush in and do on the first day of classes. You definitely, if you are someone who knows that going into college, I'm going to need some accommodations, I would urge you that as soon as you graduate from high school, to contact that Office of Student Services, figure out who the person you're supposed to be speaking with is, and make that first appointment in June or July at the latest. Um, it should not take more than 6 weeks, though. If you don't hear anything, there is you know, I would even say, like, if it's literally crickets and a week or two's gone by, then you need to, like, check again, make sure you have the right person. Maybe that person's on vacation, you need to escalate it up to someone else in the office. Um, but yeah, the whole process should be complete within 4 to 6 weeks,
Okay.
and sometimes much faster. It just depends on the school you go to.
Yeah. I guess it is, you're right. I think it's probably good to get started in the summer since it probably gets very busy at the beginning of the school year.
Yes. Yeah, if you wait till the first day of classes, you are going to be in trouble with your accommodations and you may not get them until, a month into school, at which point, um, you'll have missed some things possibly.
And for students who were to transfer to a different university, would their new college have to provide them with the same accommodations as the previous college that they attended, or do they have the right to reassess?
No, they do have the right to reassess, and the reason is because every college and university, vocational institution, they all control their curricula. They have specific faculty. They have specific teaching methods. The reason you're probably transferring is because you wanted something different. And so, just by dint of having that different environment, they have the right to determine what they can provide within their environment and what makes sense for them.
That makes sense. And I know that in high school, a lot of this process is really handled by the parents, but I wanted to ask you, do parents have any right to knowledge about, the status of their students' accommodations in college?
Nope, they really don't unless the student decides to give them access. Now, the student could do that by signing a FERPA waiver or asking the Office of Student Services if there was a specific waiver to give parents the right to access those records. Um, but in most post-secondary situations, the schools are going to want to communicate directly with the student.
So it sounds like the biggest difference is really that it's more of a student-led process once you get out of K through 12.
Oh, yeah, 100%. It is student-led. You have to initiate the process as a student. You have to bring your own documentation, and you have to follow the university or college's guidelines for receiving those services. And it's even up to you to tell your individual professors in most cases, um, because the colleges want to protect your privacy on one hand as a person who has a disability or potentially a medical condition, but they also want you to get the accommodations you need and succeed. So they put the power in your hands by giving you sometimes physical letters that you can distribute to your professors at your own discretion.
And is it up to the student as well to continue checking in if anything changes about what they need as an accommodation?
Yes, if something changes about your condition or you get in there first semester and say you have preferential seating, you've got extended time for tests and a private area for testing, and about halfway through that semester, you're like, wow, like this is really more work than high school was for me. I think I need extended time for assignments as well, or my notes just aren't cutting it. And I would really love to have a note taker. Then it's on you to go back to the Office of Disability Services and explain to them your need and advocate for it.
And
Mhm.
just before we, get ready to wrap up, I wanted to ask you, do you have any experiences that you'd like to share where you've worked with clients with dyslexia or other learning disabilities?
Oh, absolutely. So I actually have a kid with dyslexia, my own child, and advocating for her since kindergarten, first grade, and second grade when we first got her IEP is what really led me into this realm of work. Before um, my daughter was born, I was a criminal defense lawyer and worked as a public defender and worked representing people on Georgia's death row. And so when I realized how difficult it was sometimes to get services for kids that needed them, and that actually, as a criminal attorney, so many of my clients had not been able to access services when they were kids. It was one part of their story where things kind of went wrong for them. I decided that working in education law was really part of the same problem, but the more positive end where you could actually intervene and make a real difference in a young person's life before, you know, things had gotten really, really bad for them. So I love education law and, my kids why I do it basically, but I have so many great stories. I enjoy basically all of my clients. I had a little girl in second grade that I advocated for this spring who was just starting out. and had dyslexia, but also had dyscalculia, which is related to dyslexia, but much less understood. And I really enjoyed being able to be a part of the team to help educate her educators on what her needs were and what would be effective interventions for her because they had not really heard of dyscalculia before. So that's something that's also a passion of mine.
Yeah, well, I know accommodations have helped me so much, so I think it's amazing that you're coming here to help everyone learn a little bit more about, what they can do to advocate for themselves.
Oh, well, it's really my pleasure. I feel like information is power so much of the time, and it's really hard, I think, when you are a student and you're learning about the world, you're learning about yourself to know exactly what to do to advocate for yourself. And I think even for parents, um, there's no manual for what to do if your kid needs accommodations. So I'm always happy to be a resource.
Well, thank you so much. Before we, head off, is there any other advice that you would like to share?
No, just keeping in mind that, the earlier you can start communicating with your college, about your needs, probably the better that's gonna go for you. And then also, I think there are some colleges that probably do a better job with accommodations than others, and so, um, I think just knowing who you are really well and tailoring your college search to those schools that are going to really want to work with you, um, I think will set you up for the most success.
Well, thank you so much. It was really great getting to talk to you.
Yes, you as well, Kenzie. I'm so honored to have been a guest of yours and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Bye bye.